Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could teach the gullible to never be so comfortable with lies they eat like comfort food? To disregard the bogus claims and pseudoscientific limbs. Can you imagine just how much indeed the world would change? No more political predators playing on the populace with ilkas and plots to shift and kill metropolis. No more villains with the title in the Bible holding phony temper Bibles like the stuff they teach is vital. Imagine it was no one who have to prove a claim you make. And folks really feel ashamed expressing content that was fake. It's not to say we never make mistakes. It's just to say we go out of our way to show the evidence it takes.
Remain skeptical while you travel the road. The reason stay strapped with logic and facts. That's what it is, yo. Keep reality intact to help the truth grow. Question every claim, especially the ones you believe in. Remain skeptical while you travel the road. The reason.
Welcome everyone to Road to Reason, a skeptic's guide to the 21st century. I'm your host, Larry Mendoza.
And I'm Rob Penzak.
And thank you for joining us today on November, was that 22nd?
22nd,
and
I think we're at.
We have a great show. We have David Silverman, the President of American Atheist, and also the author of a new book called Fighting God, an Atheist Manifesto for a Religious World. That's a subtitle, and I can't think of a better person to write a book with that kind of title. So we're going to be talking to him about that, and it'll be an interesting conversation about that and many other things. But before we do that, I have a couple of announcements to make. Well, actually, Rob, why don't you start us off with Saved by Science?
Sure. So Saved by Science is one of the projects that I'm working on, trying to build a community in Richmond, Virginia for scientists, skeptics, atheists, humanists, critical thinkers of all sorts, and secularists. It's also important to understand that atheists, this is something that I get from Dave Silverman, we really do need to highlight that because most of those other words I ran through, except for science, people don't get. So one of the programs we're going to have there on January 10th is going to be about Islam, and we're trying to separate out bigotry from critiquing ideas such as the tenets of Islam. We're going to have two of the ex-Muslims of North America, Sarah Haider and Mohammed Saeed. Peter Boghossian is going to be joining us by Skype. He had a presentation in Canada a few months ago about Islamism and how to try to deal with that. And then Andy Thompson, who's trustee of the Dawkins Foundation, has a special expertise on religiously motivated suicide terrorism. So this is going to be a wonderful program. It's going to be free. We'll post information on this site. It's going to be Sunday, January 10th, and we look forward to that. Hope some people from this area can make it down.
Yeah, it's great events that are going on in Richmond, Virginia, so thanks for putting all that. I know Rob's he thinks he doesn't have enough to do, so he always tries to overload a schedule here, but we are thankful that he does that. Another quick announcement I want to mention, next week's show, we're going to have Chris Shelton on, and he's going to be discussing, amongst other things, how basically some inside information on how Scientology is basically destroying itself within the inside. So it'll be an interesting show. So that's next Sunday. And we're going to have a couple of new hosts doing the show next Tuesday. I want to introduce, I think it's Justice Cade,
right? And
he's going to be a co-host. It's going to be a first time doing the show.
This will be his first time. He attended Liberty University. He said he was a fundamentalist. He went there, realized that there were lots of other people that believed things exactly as strongly as he did, and they didn't all jibe. Right. So he started to think about it, started to do some reading, and eventually that led to his exit from religion. He brings a kind of a new perspective. He's going to be very interesting as a host.
And the main host is going to be Nando Lopez, who's been on the show before, but he's going to be kind of driving the show. So join in next week. It'll be fun. One last announcement, and maybe we'll have some input from David Silverman about this, but I just want to mention and remind everybody about Reason Rally 2016. This year it's going to be held, festivities begin, I think, Thursday, June 2nd, and it'll run through June 5. And there's going to be a lot of events like advocacy meetings and trainings and on Capitol Hill, along, of course, with all the guests and speakers and stuff. So it'll be fun. And it's going to be on the Lincoln Memorial this year. So, this is a not to miss event if you're
right. One of the really critical things that's going to help motivate people not to be sitting on the sidelines, to get out there and be active, be a voice, be visible. And these are all really important things. Because the more visible we are, the less easy it is to marginalize atheists and critical thinking. So I do encourage everybody to come out for that. One last announcement I want to make is that on February 21st, we're going to have a kind of interesting show, which is different than most, with Andy Thompson and Ryan Newcomb. Ryan is the regional director of the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention in Virginia, DC, and I think Maryland. So that should be a great show. Again, this is something that mental health issues, suicide, prevention of that, getting rid of the stigma involved in some of these things. It's really important. Atheists are very concerned about this also. Humanists, are concerned about this just as, as regular people. So we'll give you more information as that show comes up. I think that's it for the announcements.
So that's it for the announcements. Well, let's move on to some news items that today our news items are coming from where?
We're taking this from from the Atheist Insider, newspaper put out by American Atheist. So the first thing we want to talk about was American Atheists take on religious hospitals in the fight for patients' rights. And this is really critical that about 1/6 of the hospitals in the United States are religiously based. And the whole idea of this is that if you end up in one of those hospitals, you don't have a way right now to know if they're going to deny you certain services based on their own religious principles.
And not only that, we're seeing also more and more mergers between secular organizations or secular hospitals and religious hospitals. So we're seeing a lot more intrusion of like Catholic hospitals, for example, in merging with secular type of hospital organizations. So
and as funding gets tighter, so if you have a religious hospital starting to influence the rules and somebody has been raped,
right,
and they went to a hospital where they don't believe in the prevention, so all of a sudden this woman's going to be forced to carry that pregnancy because some administrator in that hospital thinks that their religious rights gives them the ability to.
And it's not even it's not even just one administrator's or one doctor's religious rights. It also has to do with the policy of the hospital itself. Hospital-wide or the chain of hospital-wide policies that dictate whether women can receive certain health care that they need and deserve to get. It's problematic, and I believe, and we'll let David talk about this when he comes on here later, but I believe they are trying to release the Patients' Right to Know Act, which is a proposed legislation that allows patients to be informed whether a hospital has these policies before they're treated or before they start any kind of treatment in a hospital.
Right. This came up a few months ago in our humanist group in Richmond because some of these hospitals don't honor either do not resuscitate or advance directives. So they're taking their religious belief in a soul and deciding, well, I'm sorry you have cancer, but you came to our hospital, so we're not going to let you die with dignity. So it really is a problem that affects everybody. And the idea that somebody's religious freedom lets them push their thoughts on you is something that should bother all of us.
And not just their thoughts. I mean, this is serious stuff. I mean, we're talking about personal healthcare decisions that are being intruded by a religious belief that's denying then people of certain beneficial, scientifically valid treatments that they need and just can't get at certain places. And it's not like, you have that much of a choice. I mean, in certain areas you do. You can go to one hospital or another. Here, we both live in Richmond, and we know we have choices. We have many different hospitals, but some people live in areas where they don't have that choice. And that's the big problem, I think, is in these areas where women would have to travel, 50, 60 miles, 70 miles to the next hospital to get treatment, and it's just, that's unbelievable. It's
right, and we don't want to create the impression that it's only related to the religious craziness about, sex and birth. This can be end-of-life issues too.
Sure.
And a lot of times, if you're an extremist, when they're deciding what hospital to take you to, it's whichever one is closest if it's an emergency situation. So it's not like people have free choice just to steer around this.
Exactly.
So that's one. So we're going to move on to next item from here.
And we'll let Dave kind of talk a little bit more about that when he comes on.
Right, and Dave, if you're listening, one thing I do want him to get to weigh in on is, with a kind of medicine, is how Bush decided that we should hold off on stem cell research.
Right.
What are the implications to millions of people across the country with a whole list of serious medical disorders?
Absolutely.
So again, that's somebody taking their personal religious opinion and affecting millions of people.
Right.
Second news story that we want to cover here. We should all understand government, especially those running for president, or we can extend that to especially those leading the government. So Larry, tell us what's going on.
What we often hear from the right and the religious right is that they're Constitution. They understand it. But the problem is what we're seeing right now, especially on the right, on the Republican side, is a lot of candidates that clearly have no clue about what the Constitution is or any constitutional rights. For example, and this is kind of a topic that is tangentially important to this, is the Syrian refugees. We're seeing a lot of especially southern right-wing governors who are out there calling out the idea that we're not going to allow these refugees because of what happened in Paris, and we don't want these terrorists here, and this, that, and the other. What they don't understand, though, is that they have no power. The states have no power over issues of refugees. And it is clearly an issue of the federal government, as is dictated, I think it's Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. not only that, but because of that, there's been Supreme Court decisions that kind of solidified that issue, and also Congress ratified and the President Carter signed the Refugee Act of 1980. So we can and we must allow these refugees here in our country as humanists, as humanitarian humanists, and not fear the right-wing rhetoric of terrorist attacks. Since 9/11, I believe we've had like 127,000 or so Syrian refugees, and only 3 of them have been arrested in association with terrorism.
Right, and there are screening procedures that go on overseas before they come here. And just the intellectual ground of, most of the refugees are fleeing from this kind of terror. They're not the ones invoking it, and for years, atheists amongst others have been trying to point out, we need to look at this ideology because it leads to some dangerous things.
Well, here's the thing about that, and this is something that I've been very vocal about recently, even on Facebook, is that, I am one of the biggest, criticizers of Islam, but I also understand that, what I criticize is exactly what these refugees are trying to escape. So even though they may be Muslims, that does not mean that we should not allow them into this country and give them an opportunity to survive and live a normal life like everyone else. That is a human right. And if they want to come here to find that, I welcome them, and I hope that they come here, because these are the people that will reform Islam into a way where it's not going to be, jihadist in method. And there's many sects of Islam, and it's a matter of embracing those who are willing to reform it and go, and so
we're not highly in favor of Donald Trump's suggestion to reinstate the yellow stars and tattoos on.
And again, speaking of which, constitutionally, Donald Trump wants to have a database on all Muslims in the world or in the country, and he wants to mark them somehow. I mean, it's just, besides even a Nazi reference, I mean, it's unbelievable, and it's completely unconstitutional. Anyways, having said that, we got a couple of minutes, but yeah, to summarize that, yes, our candidates need to know our Constitution, and it seems like some of them have no clue.
And our Supreme Court justices, it would also be helpful if they understood about the Constitution versus
that would also be
a separate issue. All right, you want to move on to the secular person? So
let's talk about the secular or atheist person of the week, depending which term we want to use. Well, this week it's going to be a number of people, not just one. These are people that are taking a stand against Islamism, against the horrible things that ISIS is doing, with even the foreknowledge that they will be criticized as being bigots for no other reason that they may appear to be offensive, and this is coming mostly from a dogmatic, regressive leftist position. People like Sam Harris, Bill Maher, Peter Boghossian, Mohammed Syed and Sarah Haider of ex-Muslims of North America. Faisal Saeed al-Mutar, an ex-Iraqi refugee here. A wonderful person by the name of Mariam Namazieh, who is a Iranian-born British citizen right now who's been fighting Islamism, but she's also been banned from speaking at universities, things like that.
Right, so she was banned because it was going to be similar to hate speech. And again, the hate speech that these people are offering is, hey, some of these ideologies are really dangerous and are leading to people being butchered, so we should look at these closely and figure out a way to deal with it. They're the ones that aren't saying, hey, this is a Muslim, let's tattoo them. Right. So we really need to be clear that the right wing and Sam Harris and all the other people you listed have very different views in terms of Islam and what we need to protect against. One is very xenophobic and bigoted. Right. The other is about criticizing ideologies.
And ideologies drive behaviors. And also the last person I want to mention who's not an atheist, but he's actually an ex-jihadist, an ex-extremist, Muslim extremist by the name of Majid Nawaz, and who's now a liberal atheist, who's also working, ironically enough, with Sam Harris and trying to discuss and reform Islam. So. Hats off to you guys.
So now we're going to make the uncomfortable segue into the joke of the week. I'm going to read this because I didn't take time to memorize it totally. This comes from Jerry Coyne's Why Evolution is True blog, which is a fantastic blog if people aren't familiar with it. An atheist was walking through the woods, a naturalist, marveling at the beauty around him. What majestic trees, what mighty rivers, what exquisitely well-adapted animals. I added that. Just then he heard a rustling in the bushes behind him and turned to see an enormous grizzly bear. Ill-prepared, the atheist took off and ran. But the bear was much faster, of course. The first time the atheist looked back, the bear was 50 feet away. The second time, 25. The third time he turned, he tripped over a root, stumbled, fell to the ground, and the bear was upon him. The bear raised one paw, grabbed him by the throat, was prepared to strike. Just then the atheist cried out, "God, no!" And in that very moment, the bear froze, and a voice called down from the heavens, "You deny me all these years, preach that I don't exist, and now you expect my help as if you were a true believer?" Terrified, but scrambling to save himself, the atheist stared directly into the light and said, "You're right, Lord. What a hypocrite I would be if I were to ask you to treat me as a Christian at this point." The bear, however, "O merciful one, might not you make the bear into a Christian?" Now, God wasn't one to be trifled with, but the invitation to plant his flag in a whole new species did have a certain appeal, and thus God agreed. The lights went out, time came unglued, and the bear dropped his right paw, bringing both paws together as he bowed his head to speak. "Thank you, Lord, for this bountiful harvest that I am about to eat. Amen." With that, we go to our public service announcement. We'll be back with David Silverman in just a couple minutes.
A critical thinker is in a frame of mind of always questioning everything, including things they don't necessarily want to question. You may have done some research and satisfied yourself on a position you're sure is right. Good. Now, after a month or two of that, go look at some research that opposes your point of view or challenges the position you've taken. You can even look into it with the idea of poking holes in their arguments if you want, but it would be better to just have an open mind and read it as though you'd never heard or seen anything on the issue before. You may be very surprised what you learn, and if you're doing this right, you will be. Always be open to opposing points of view and counter arguments. That's what critical thinking is all about. And now you know.
Thank you, dear. Well, you're very supple. Just like I was at your age. Back then, I was a sex expert. Used to call me the buttered biscuit. I know about birth control, too. So you can ask me anything, baby.
Bedsider.org has birth control information and a lot more. And it's...
Have you had sex in this car yet?
This is Richard Dawkins. Doing commercials is unfamiliar territory for me, but I'm inviting you to watch Road to Reason, a skeptic's guide to the 21st century, on Fairfax Public Access every Sunday. Each week the hosts tackle wishful thinking, religion, pseudoscience, and the harm they cause, with a combination of facts, humor, and community involvement. They challenge believers to defend their faith and give you, the skeptic, a voice. With live call-ins for viewers and streaming on the World Wide Web, there's never a dull moment. Don't wait. Look at them now on Facebook and YouTube, and remember to watch Road to Reason, a skeptic's guide to the 21st century, or there'll be hell to pay.
Looks like it's done.
Don't let salmonella get funky with your chicken. On average, 1 in 6 Americans will get a foodborne illness this year. You can't see these microbes, but they might be there. So learn the right temperature to cook each type of meat. Keep your family safe at foodsafety.gov.
Body language can tell you all sorts of things. Like someone is having a stroke. Know the sudden signs. Learn fast. Face drooping, arm weakness, speech difficulty. Time to call 911 and get them to a hospital immediately. Learn the body language and spot a stroke fast.
Back to Road to Reason, a skeptic's guide to the 21st century. We're back here. We're going to patch in David Silverman, who is the President of American Atheists, and also the author of a new book called Fighting God, an atheist manifesto for a religious world. David, are you there?
I am here. Thanks for having me on the show again.
Wonderful. I guess you're joining us while you're traveling in one of your many travels to destroy Christianity across the country.
Well, actually, we're just leaving from a soft launch from Fighting God. We launched at a small convention this weekend called PhilCon. It was a soft launch. The actual launch is on December 1st, but we just sold our first books this past weekend, and it was pretty exciting.
Cool. Congratulations.
Oh, congratulations. That's exciting stuff. Yeah, I was going to mention, I was going to ask you, your book is coming out next week, so this is, perfect timing. So let's get right into it. So first of all, Fighting God. That's an interesting title. Can you explain?
Well, sure. Originally, what was going on? So I had this book called I, Atheist, and it was supposed to have been published, and it was 50% me and 50% atheism. And I parted ways with the publisher, got myself an agent, got myself a new publisher, Macmillan, one of the largest publishers in the world. And they said to me, we're taking out everything out of the book that's about you, we're changing the cover, and we're changing the title.
Oh.
And so I took everything about me out, and I rewrote the rest of the book. And basically what happened is I wrote what I called The Atheist Art of War. And I really like that title. And if you read Fighting God, you'll see it's clearly written, or at least it was at one time, clearly written to be The Atheist Art of War. But the publisher didn't like it. So instead they chose Fighting God. And I'm all right with it. I like the title. It's very punchy, and people are talking about it a lot.
Oh yeah, it's definitely a punchy title, especially kind of with the kind of brand of atheism you kind of do. It's definitely a good title for that. So
now, but before we get off the title too far, we were talking before the show, and I know that you said your oldest ancestor on memory is David from David and Goliath. All right, you didn't actually say that, but I wanted this to be David and Goliath. I wanted this to be David and Goliath too. I said David used a slingshot, and Goliath at the time just had a shield and a spear. Can you actually go into a little bit about what tools, what weapons do you use now for this war against religion, and how does religion defend itself? Does it do an honest fight, or does it use some tricks that we should be aware of?
So we have the greatest weapon there is. I mean, in Fighting God, I talk about the fact that they have more people than us by far. They have more money than us by far. But we have a monopoly on the biggest weapon, which is truth. All of the truth, everything that we know to be true in the world agrees with us. None of the truth that we know to be true in the world agrees with the idea of an invisible man in the sky. So we have two tools. We have all the truth in the world and the internet, which is a great means to communicate it. And does the opposition fight fair? No, it can't fight fair. It doesn't have the ability to fight fair. If it fought fair, it would say, okay, you have all the data on your side. We're wrong. We're clearly wrong. You win. But there's too much money there. They're not going to fight fair. So they're going to twist the words around. They're going to try and make fake science. In Fighting God, I talk about the fact that the teleological argument and the cosmological argument, the argument from the design, that is, and the argument for morality are really just dressed up version of the God of the Gaps. Mm-hmm. And I point out that this is intentional, that this is something that they're trying to hide God of the Gaps, and that God of the Gaps comes from the Neanderthals. And we can just make that assumption. We don't have any hard data for that one, but God of the Gaps must have come from the original Neanderthals who invented the religion, who used their God to explain what they did not know. That's what gods did. They explained what they did not know. Why did the sun cross the sky? Where did the rain come from? I don't know. God did it. And this is the exact same argument as the cosmological argument and the teleological argument and the argument for morality. Where did all this stuff come from? I don't know. It must be God. And this is not honest. This is very dishonest. The people who read it think, oh, well, that makes sense. But they don't realize that it is just the God of the Gaps argument repackaged and put forth as if it's scientific. It's not. It's a scam.
Well, yeah, and there's a lot of wonderful literature out there about even the evolution of religion and how that all came about and why people thought that it was a God that kind of, chased the sun across the sky and things like that. So, yeah, it's one thing to be somebody, back in those days who was very ignorant of the science and things. But now that we have data and science, there's no excuse, really. There really isn't an excuse to dismiss that, and I think that's one of the biggest problems that I'm seeing.
Yeah. Okay, can you say? Oh, go ahead.
The excuse is the brainwashing. Okay, people have an excuse to be religious, and that is that they've been subject to the same brainwashing that our parents were subject to, and most of us were subject to. I mean, we are a very complex combination of logical leanings, positive and minuses, and all of the experience that we've had growing up. And, if you don't have a genetic leaning to logic, or if you haven't been, or if you have been exposed to heavy-duty brainwashing as a child, you can't be blamed for being religious, but you are a person who needs help, and even if you don't know it.
Right, I think that's a really important distinction. I've seen you make it before, and you made this with Frank Turek actually during a debate or after. How do you feel about Frank Turek? Do you hate him because of his religion, or do you see him as you'd like to help him see the light?
I don't hate Frank Turek. I don't hate Frank Turek. I don't hate Bill Devlin. I don't hate Alex McFarland. I don't hate Dinesh D'Souza. These are either victims or liars.
Right.
If they're liars, they're atheists. And there's really no good way to tell.
Right.
They're either liars or they're victims of a lie. And they tell lies, meaning, which is different from lying. Telling lies is different from lying. The lie of God, the idea that God exists is a lie, and people tell that lie, whether they know it's a lie or not. And if these folks, these guys, my debate opponents, and let's just put in Hannity and O'Reilly in there too. If these guys are liars, they're con artists, they're scammers, and they deserve to be exposed. If they're not lying, they're victims of the greatest brainwashing that's ever happened to anybody in the world. I mean, this is the greatest lie in the history of the planet, that there's a man in the sky, and it's nothing that we can blame them for because everybody's been exposed to it. So I don't like the word excuse because it implies blame. What I do prefer is that if there's somebody who is actually going on an independent project, who is actually going to go into this with an open mind, who's actually going to look at all the religions neutrally, no, there is no excuse for being religious if you come from that perspective.
Yeah, and I met Frank Turek back in 2008. He actually came and debated Christopher Hitchens, the late Christopher Hitchens, the first Hitchens-Turek debate in 2008. Actually, the Secular Student Alliance at VCU, or the United Secular Alliance at VCU, organized that debate, and we were able to get Christopher Hitchens to debate Frank Turek. So I met the guy, very nice guy, but I also read his book. I don't have enough faith to be an atheist, which is, but yeah, it's hard to tell people like Frank Turek or William Lane Craig or any of these guys that are actually making money off of this stuff, whether they're being victims or whether they're being the perpetrators of the lie. It's really hard to tell at this point.
Yeah.
But the idea that these are people, as Peter Boghossian would say, victims of a bad epistemic system, these are not necessarily malignant. Some of them maybe. Some apologists, in my mind, it's hard to see that they're not. But given our cognitive setup, these may just be dupes, and it's a healthier approach to see that we need to help them educate themselves instead of just being angry.
Well, you'd figure as many atheists as these guys have debated, at some point they would start to. But again, it's hard to tell. But let's move on, with your book. So you kind of got into a little bit about why you wrote the book, or at least how it evolved into what it is today. But what gave you the idea to write a book about, it's almost about, I haven't read the book, obviously it's not out, but I'm assuming it's a lot of defending firebrand atheism. Would that be a correct assumption?
And that's where it started out. The book, I didn't want to do something that had already been done.
Okay.
And I wanted to do something new and different and important. And I wanted to take the arguments that have been put forth and put some sort of utility to them. I also wanted to put to the side this my way is the right way, your way is the wrong way mentality that we have inside the movement. I don't think we need that mentality, and I tried to put that to the side, and I tried to highlight the fact that this is my way. This is why my way is best. This is why I think my way is best. And, if you have, and here's my data to prove it. Here's my data to support it. If you don't like that, then that's fine, and we're not enemies. And this is what I wanted to put forth during the book. And what happened was when I switched publishers and I came out with this new publisher, and this new publisher told me to take all of the stuff out of my book that was about me and just make it strictly about firebrand atheism. Well, that put me into a situation where I really didn't know what to write, because I kind of had already written everything that I wanted to write. And what I started doing is research to back my stuff up even more and to bring in more data. And so what has come out of it, Fighting God has come out with what I think is a very persuasive argument with multiple data sources, multiple quantitative data sources that supports firebrand atheism on a micro level and on a macro level. And I think what people are going to take away from this is that this is not that it may be that live and let live is not the ethical choice. It may be that we have a responsibility to push atheism. And I think it may be that it's not moral to hide behind euphemisms. And I do want to address the fact that, yeah, it's hard, but you have to understand that when you hide behind a euphemism, it actually is my business.
Right.
It actually is something that affects me, because we as a country are so lopsided when it comes to religion in the polls, but only in the polls. I mean, I read a poll, and I go into this in Fighting God. If you look at the polls, you'll see that we're about 70% Christian and about 3% atheist. And that makes us look really, really small, and that makes the Christians look really, really big. But in reality, we're not that way at all. In reality, we're closer right now to 30%, at least 25% atheists in this country. And I can back that up. Now, that's aggressive. Those are aggressive numbers. And I say that in the book. But they're legitimate numbers, and they're defensible numbers. Now,
hey, before you move on, can you run through some of the people that you put into that atheist category? Because I read some of that, and people may not realize, oh yeah, I am an atheist. Can you run through some people that need to realize they're atheists too?
Well, an atheist is a person who doesn't have a belief in a God, right? So anybody who doesn't have a belief is an atheist, and this includes people who don't like the fact that they're atheists. Okay, this includes people who are secular, who call themselves secular, who call themselves secular nuns, N-O-N-E-S, who call themselves agnostics, who call themselves brights, secular Jews, and it also includes people who call themselves Christians, but who don't think God is supernatural. I included a Barnard research survey, which said that 22%, and this is just one survey, but it makes a very good important point, that 22% of the people who call themselves Christians see God as a metaphor or love or humanity or the universe.
Interesting.
These are atheists. Okay? Right. So, I mean, if you really bunch all of that together and take an aggressive approach, but it's a defensible approach, then you're talking about a 25 to 30% atheist group, and you're talking about a 55% Christian group. So now, all of a sudden, we've gone from 70% and 3% to 55% and 30%. Right. This is a really huge difference, and it changes the entire fabric of our political system. Right. And we don't have to convert a single person. All we have to do is get the atheists who are already atheists to call themselves atheists. Yep. And we change the country. Right. And this is the point. You know, people say, well, look at all the things that we're doing. We're not going to convert people with these billboards. Right. Guess what? We're not trying to convert people with billboards. Right. Okay? They think that we're trying to do what the Christians are trying to do, but we're not. We're just trying to get our people out of the church pews. We're trying to get our people off their knees. We're trying to get our people to deal with the fact that they are atheists. And again, I want to say this very clearly. If you don't have a belief in a God, and you really, really hate the word atheist, you're still an atheist.
Right.
And we have to get that through to people. And people can say, oh, it makes me so unhappy when you identify me like that. Tough shit. You're tough.
We do have to watch the language on here, otherwise our producer.
Tough, you're still an atheist.
Yeah.
And that's too bad. And by the way, you're right. By the way, it's a good thing. And yes, most importantly, by the way, it affects me. Because that poll affects me. What you call yourself, if you call yourself something that doesn't help us, it affects me. And yes, I have a right to have an opinion of it. No, I don't have a right to shove my way down your face or anything like that. And if you refuse, you refuse. But there is a very definite interest that we all have in all of us calling ourselves atheists. There's a very definite, huge interest that we all have in that. And I say that we should be having that conversation with each other.
Yep, and I totally agree with that.
Yeah, so a lot of people, like, I'm a humanist. Everything that drives my activism is because I'm a humanist. Can you just make it really clear, why am I shortchanging the system and bailing on atheists if I say that and leave it at that? What's the problem with saying I'm a humanist?
Okay, so again, one of the things that I'm very happy about with in Fighting God is I use independent data, quantitative data from multiple sources, independent sources, and I have independent data from independent quantitative data from Openly Secular that shows me how many people, what percentage of the population actually know what these words mean.
Right.
Okay? Now, according to this data, and it's in the book, it's in Fighting God, according to this data, 87% of the country know essentially what an atheist is. Okay? 87% know what an atheist is. 50%, 50, know what an agnostic is. 30% know what secular means. And when you go to humanist, you're at 11%.
Wow.
11%. So when you call yourself a humanist and walk away, and I want to make sure you understand here, when I say they don't understand what it means, I mean they don't understand that it is atheistic. So when you walk away calling yourself a humanist, you literally have an 89% chance of being presumed theist.
Right.
And you are not helping anyone. You are not helping anyone. You are not helping to educate. You are not helping to demonize the word. You are not helping the next person who's going to call themselves an atheist. You're hiding. If the right thing to do, if you need to call yourself a humanist, and I don't have a problem with people doing that, the right way to do it, to call yourself a humanist and an atheist.
Right.
Because people know what an atheist is. And what I ask people to do is just think about this. Think about what if you were religion, okay? If you were religion, what word would you want the atheists to use to identify themselves? Would you want the one that's understood 87% of the time, or the one that's misunderstood and presumed theistic 89% of the time?
Right.
And we don't help anybody by hiding ourselves.
Right, and I agree with you. And I just recently had this conversation with and I'm not going to mention the name of the person, but a leader of a secular student group who's actually having this type of infighting within the group about what they should call themselves and what kind of message they want to have. And it's unfortunate that there's a lot of the students who don't like the word atheist. They don't want to use the word atheist, but they're part of a secular group, and she even mentioned, like, what does secularism even mean? And nobody, it's one of those words that is very confusing, and we cannot be afraid to use the word atheist, because at the end of the day, that's what we're pushing for, is to people understand that we are here. There are people who are atheists. We need to normalize that word. We need to normalize the people, normalize and humanize these people who are atheists, and not kind of
not hide.
Right,
I mean, think about this. If you're going up to a person, if you're an atheist and you go up to a person and this person, let's just say, is an anti-atheist person. Let's say he's an atheophobe, and you say, okay, I'm not an atheist. I'm a humanist, or I'm a secular this or a secular that. You have this whole conversation with them, and you walk away, and they think, wow, at least that person wasn't an atheist. Right.
Right.
So now let's take the other side. You You say, I'm an atheist, and he says, I don't like atheists. And it's an unpleasant experience, okay? You've walked away, and you've put a face to the word atheist, and you've taken a little bit of the shock from him. He met an atheist, and that person, he wasn't a bad person, but I got all in his face.
Yeah.
The next atheist that guy meets is going to have an easier time. Okay?
Right.
So when you call yourself an atheist, you're taking it on the chin a little bit, but you are educating the person, and you are making it easier for the next atheist to come along. You might not know who that is. You're never going to know who that is.
Right.
But you are de-demonizing it for the next person. That is humanism.
Right.
Right? That is why calling yourself an atheist is more humanistic than calling yourself a humanist. Because calling yourself a humanist, I think, in many cases, not all cases, but in many cases, is a very selfish thing to do. It's you hiding your atheism behind some other word that's more politically correct. But why is it more politically correct? Because 90% of the country doesn't understand what it means.
Right.
You're not defeating any of the bigotry. You're not accomplishing any sort of education. You're not defeating anything. You're not causing change. You're hiding to make yourself feel better in the moment.
Right.
As opposed to taking it on the chin just a little bit, and let's face it, it is just a little bit,
right.
And de-demonizing it a lot and making it easier for the next person. So that's why I don't think anybody should call themselves a humanist and just walk away.
Right.
I think that's the wrong thing to do. It's not activistic, and it's not humanistic. I think it's a selfish thing to do. Call yourself an atheist and a humanist.
One of the things I like to do, and this has happened to me in the past, I obviously have no fear of telling people I'm an atheist, and every time I start a new job, and this happened to me at the last job I got to meet people and got to talk to a lot of different people, my coworkers, and very friendly. And then one day, just in conversation, I was like, yeah, well, I'm an atheist, and I get this, this one coworker gave me this look like, I've never met an atheist before, and I told her, you probably have. Yeah. Chances are you have, but she was kind of shocked, and she thought she had this preconceived notion of what atheists are supposed to be like, and I did not fit that preconceived notion.
Right.
So yeah, there is a lot of value in telling people that.
Also, you're often not just talking to one person. So if somebody says, "I hate atheists," and you go up and you say, "Well, I'm an atheist," even if they don't want to make any connection to you, if there's 5 people standing around at the bus stop. On the fence, they might say, you know what, the religious guy's being a nut. That atheist is pretty level-headed, is being pretty friendly, and so it changes a lot of views. And I love your message of activism. I think it's really important.
Yeah. So let's can you we've kind of talked about firebrand atheism, but if you were to define firebrand atheism, which I'm sure you do in your book, but if you were to define it like 1 or 2 sentences, what is it? What is firebrand atheism?
Okay, so if I were to define firebrand atheism in 1 or 2 sentences, it would be tell the truth as often as possible, emphasis on the tell. Okay, it's all about making people know that you're an atheist. It's all about not lying, telling the truth. If you are an atheist, you say you're an atheist. You don't hide behind euphemisms. If somebody says, do you respect my religious belief? And you don't respect their religious belief, say you don't respect their religious belief. It's the truth.
Right.
Don't hide behind. Don't let people think that inequality is the norm. That's not acceptable. And if you say it is acceptable, you're not telling the truth. Tell the truth and say it's not acceptable. And make sure that people know that when you attack their religion, you're not attacking them as a person.
Right.
That's the truth too. This is all the truth. It comes down to conveying the fact that you're an atheist, not being afraid to say you're an atheist, and when somebody asks you what your opinion is of religion, telling the truth. And not couching it, and not putting religion on a pedestal, and not protecting religion, and realizing that religion doesn't have any sort of authority over you, even if it's really closely held. It's not authority over you. That's all that firebrand atheism is. A lot of people think firebrand atheism is more about getting in people's faces and calling them retarded and this and that. This is nothing what I do.
Right.
It's nothing. This is nothing about what I do. Is about going after people and insulting people. Religious people are not stupid people. They're victims.
Right.
Okay, they are victims of an indoctrination of the greatest lie in the history of the planet. They deserve pity, not scorn, not hate. They need help. They are victims, and they need help. And we have to admit that. And yes, even though religion says the same thing, we still have to say it.
Right.
Because, and how do we know the difference? How do we know we're right and they're wrong? Because again, all the facts that we know as a society agree with us. None of the data supports religion. All of the data supports us. So we know we're right, we know they're wrong, and we know they're victims of a scam. And this is true. It is just as true as if we know they're victims of a scam if they're paying money to an astrologer or if they're paying money to a tarot card reader. We know it's a scam.
Right, exactly.
And it's our job as humanists to help. And I know that feels bad. It doesn't. People don't like to hear that, but it is our job as humanists to help.
Right. And you know, and yeah, absolutely. And I agree with just about everything you said. And it's something that I've also been trying to, you know, tell people and try to push is this idea that don't hide behind, you know, this PC, you know, and I'm having a big problem with, like, you know, the regressive leftists and these dogmatic kind of liberals that are trying to kind of hide and not want to, you know, offend anybody by calling themselves atheists. Or, I mean, it's just, it gets silly. But
and think about think about what that helps. Think about what that does. It doesn't help us. It doesn't help us. It doesn't help the people you're talking to. What does it help? It helps organized religion. It's like the best thing that we can do for organized religion is to stay quiet.
Right.
It's like the one thing that organized religion wants from us most of all is to sit down, shut up, and call ourselves something that nobody understands.
Right.
That's like the best thing for organized religion. The victims of religion, they suffer. The atheists, we suffer. The country, our civil rights, that suffers. But religion benefits when we shut up. So what the hell are we doing?
Exactly. And that's, ladies and gentlemen, that's firebrand atheism.
Yeah, don't hold back, Dave. We want to hear what you're really
That's exactly what we are talking about. And you know, it's very, no, but Dave is correct. Even to get, like, you know.
Let me jump to something new.
Sure.
So debates are one technique that you can use for firebrand atheism. You can use it for a lot of things. Can you explain, you know, the context? And you said this once, that you're not trying to change the person's mind across from you. They may be already closed. What is the purpose of having debates?
Well, the purpose of having debates is YouTube. It's all about YouTube, because the way people go on quests, the way people look for information is they look for debates, and they look for who makes more sense. Now, I do these debates, and of course, you're never going to get the other side to say, "Gee, you're right, you win." But because all of the facts are on our side, I can debate anybody and look victorious to the onlookers. And what I'll see over and over again as we go, as I go from debate to debate to debate, I'll find churchgoers who tell me I won the debate, and that's a good thing. And that is multiplied by some huge number when you think about the internet, when you think about YouTube, when you think about how many people are watching that, when you think about how many people are hoping for the Christian to win and they get disappointed. I just had a debate with Alex McFarland, and I got him to admit on stage that he is anti-equality, that he's against equality, he's against religious equality. This is a powerful point. Now, did he say that he was wrong to be against religious equality? No, he thinks he's doing right. Just like every other theist who does something bad, they think they're doing something good. But if you're on the fence and you're looking at it from the sidelines, you're going to get a very interesting picture in your mind when you see somebody saying, on the one hand, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, and on the other hand, we need to be unequal because my religion is better than yours.
Right. Exactly. So I want to kind of, you know, kind of stick with the book, but are you going to be doing a book tour? I mean, I guess you already have been doing some, you know, but now that the book's going to be released, and is there somewhere we can go to find information about the book and any book tours you're doing and dates and things like that?
Yeah, we're going to have the book tour is already starting. I'm starting in Los Angeles on the 4th of December. The book launches on December 1, and I'm going from Los Angeles to, let's see if I get this right now, Los Angeles, Colorado Springs, Phoenix, Portland, Seattle, Las Vegas in December. And then in January, I'm going to be in Boston, and Atlanta, I'll be at the Black Non-Believers Convention, the 5th anniversary.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very privileged to be a part of that.
Sure.
I'm going to be back at Boston again, probably be doing Connecticut and New Jersey. And then I think we're probably going to hit some more tours. So the place to go is my Facebook, facebook.com/Dave Silverman, or you can go to atheists.org/fightinggod. And you can see where my tour dates are. And I have a Fighting God Twitter, it's @FightingGodBook. And of course, you can also watch my Twitter, my personal Twitter, @Mr. Atheist Pants.
Who do we talk to beg you to come down to Richmond for a talk?
Oh, we can make it. We can make it happen.
Let's do it.
Especially in the spring. I love Richmond in the spring.
Yeah, awesome. As a matter of fact, we'll talk offline about that. But yeah, let's try to set something up for that. I would really.
Yeah, the only thing we have to worry about is I got this other thing in the spring. This this big rally thing going
on. That's secondary to.
That's overrated.
Yeah, that's overrated. I mean, it's don't worry. We can squeeze that in around.
Do you want to tell us anything about that other thing while we're on it?
Well, yeah. While we're on it, the Reason Rally 20. For those of you who weren't at Reason Rally 2012, we had 30,000 atheists at the Washington Mall. We had a great time. 30,000 atheists was the largest atheist event in world history, and we are doing it again in 2016, June 4th, 2016. Come one, come all. It's going to be a huger event. It's going to be bigger. We're going to have and the way it's going to be is it's going to be a Reason Rally weekend. So you're going to have a lobby day, you're going to have a fundraising party, and you're going to have an after party, and you're also going to have an after convention, a mini convention afterwards.
Oh, wonderful!
And all of the funds raised are going to be divided among the major sponsors of the Reason Rally.
Sure.
So it's a Reason Rally movement weekend.
Awesome.
And American Atheist is not having a national convention next year. We're not doing anything with any convention next year. All eyes, we're asking everybody, go to the Reason Rally. It is, if you haven't gone, and if you haven't gone, I can tell you that it's an amazing experience. I still hear from people who went the first time about how it changed so much, and it introduced him to so many great, fantastic new people. Please come to the Reason Rally, June 4th. Make your reservations now.
Yeah, we're all in Richmond. We're already talking. There's a contingent that wants to try to come up as a group, so we're really excited. One other thing that American Atheist does, I want to talk about a little bit, is Atheist TV. We've been really fortunate and appreciate being a part of that, so people can see the show on Roku. Can you tell me where that's heading, how it stands now?
Yeah. Roku Atheist TV is doing well. What we have done is we've pared down a little bit. We've taken off the channel, so you can still see video on demand on Roku, and we're going to be expanding to Amazon Fire soon. And basically what this does, and I'm so glad you guys are a part of it, is it creates another place where there's atheism.
Right.
And that's the point. So another place. And so we have it on Roku now. We're going to have it on Amazon Fire as soon as we get some things ironed out. And we'll just be able to have atheist programming in more televisions, in more living rooms, and we'll be able to track it. We are able to track it. People are watching it. And the interesting thing is that people are watching it very, very sparsely.
Sure.
It's not like concentrated. There's a lot of watchers all over the country. It's pretty exciting.
One of our new hosts that's going to start hosting here actually saw Road to Reason for the first time on Atheist TV.
Excellent.
So, and by the way, did I just hear an endorsement from Dave Silverman for Road to Reason? Was that did I just hear that right?
Yeah, Road to Reason is good.
Okay.
We're going to edit it into that, whether you said it or not.
We expect a commercial since Richard Dawkins did one for us. Maybe we'll get one from Dave Silverman. Huh? So.
Could happen.
No, I've got one more question. I don't know.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. So in Richmond, I told you this before, you sort of got thrown under the bus with some excellent company of Richard Dawkins, Michael Shermer, yourself, and Sam Harris. And it wasn't by the right wing. It was a talk on atheism and feminism. And again, I know myself, a lot of people on the show, we're all strong feminists. We're very liberal. We agree with almost all of the plank. And yet, so the knock on you was that you went to CPAC and were basically auctioning off a woman's right to autonomy, trying to get some extra people. And you tried to speak against it. But can you, if you want to share your views, those aren't necessarily critical, but what were you doing at CPAC, and speak to them?
It gets me so frustrated when people actually seem to seek out reasons to insult and throw stones. It's tiring. I don't really listen to it very much anymore. I don't really pay too much attention to it because it saddens me. I went to CPAC for a very specific reason that I've been very, very clear on, and that is to sow a wedge between Christianity and conservatism.
Right.
I think I've made really, really great progress. In only 2 years, we went from not being able to even attend or not being able to have a booth to having a booth, having a speaking slot from the stage as atheists, and having people walk around by the hundreds wearing conservative atheist buttons. The idea is very simple. Once upon a time, Christianity and conservatism were not the same thing. And if we can go back to that time, and that wasn't very long ago, that was in my lifetime. And if we can go back to that kind of a situation, we win. And when I say we win, I'm talking about bodily autonomy. I'm talking about LGBT equality.
Absolutely.
I'm talking about death with dignity. If we can separate Christianity from conservatism, we win.
Right.
And I mean, just think about it. We could be atheists voting for Republicans with a clear conscience.
Right.
Think about that.
And that's good for the country.
And that's good for the country. And it's not throwing anybody under the bus.
Right.
I am vehemently pro-choice. I started my activism in choice before I got into separation of church and state. I don't like it when people look at, I mean, and I can't see how anybody would like it.
Yeah.
When people look at your action and they just take a snip and they say, okay, I'm going to just say that he's doing something bad that I don't like, and not have any data with it.
To support it, right.
Not, you know, I do a lot of things that make people angry. I prefer it much more if people get angry for things that I actually do.
Right, for the right reasons.
I mean,
right.
I have a lot of things. There's a lot of things you can get angry at over me. But throwing women under the bus so that I could get a few members at CPAC, that's just not true.
Yeah. All right. Well, we got about a minute, 30 seconds left. I want to quickly, you know, and by the way, I agree with all of that. I'm actually been saddened as well by the rhetoric, especially, and again, what I call these progressive leftists, you know.
These folks are still allies, and I still listen to them, because if they're not hearing, if they're still coming out with this, then I'm not getting my message out clear enough, and I care about that.
Okay, we got 1 minute, but real quick, can we talk about atheist voter and some of the things that's going on with that? And you got like literally like less than 30 seconds to do it.
So Atheist Voter is all about, you go to atheistvoter.org. What we're doing is we're establishing the atheist voting block in this election cycle. We're getting people to go out to the candidates and actually wear atheist voter shirts and ask specific questions as atheists. We're making the candidates face the atheists this election.
Good.
So go to atheistvoter.org and you can find where your candidates are going to be and go there and ask them questions, and it's a fantastic way to do it. I do it myself. I just had a nice talk with Cory Booker.
We're going to have to cut you off right there, but yes, atheistvoter.org, go check it out. I want to thank you, David, for coming on the show, and we'll catch you next time, and we'll definitely keep in touch.
Chris Shelton.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, David.
Bye-bye. And bye, fighting God.